with Sam Cedar.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Cedar.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Friday, March 20th, 2020. My name is Sam Cedar. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps, many steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. It's Casual Friday, folks, but man, I feel like we've said multiple times in the past, it's not really that casual. Sort of oddly casual, but not casual. I don't know. I think I've been inside too long. And I'm, of course, wearing my soft-collared shirt. And joining us on the program today, Alex Pareene from the New Republic will be with us, if all goes well. And then, if all goes well, Brendan James, creator of Blowback podcast, former Chapo Trap House producer. He's got a new show, Blowback podcast. Also on the program today, starting off where we started yesterday. Oh, it's Blowback, not Blockback. Sorry, misread that. Starting off where we started yesterday, but the story has moved. Republicans Senator Richard Burr, also Lafleur from Georgia, Inhofe, Perdue also from Georgia, Ron Johnson from Wisconsin, dumped stocks after getting a coronavirus briefing. Meanwhile, the White House asked states not to release their jobless numbers because, you know, California on statewide lockdown, New York State also on lockdown starting Sunday, California starting last night. Republican Governor DeSantis, however, in Florida, refuses to close packed spring break beaches. I don't know if you remember Jaws. The mayor wouldn't shut down the beaches because of Jaws. This is actually worse. Trump lies about a malaria drug being approved for coronavirus by the FDA. And the White House claims masks available now despite the fact that nurses and doctors are saying they're experiencing widespread shortages. And new reporting shows that the delivery of those 5 million masks that Trump is talking about is not going to happen for 18 months. And despite all that, an ABC Ipsos poll, big margin of error, but still, 55% approve of Trump's handling of the crisis. Meanwhile, the acting head of counterterrorism fired in a White House purge. Yeah, because look, the business of the White House has to go on. It can't just stop because of this pandemic. Senate Republicans release a stimulus that is regressive. And the Congressional Progressive Caucus counters with one that is more generous. All this and more on today's program. Yes, here we go. All right. There we are. ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us today. I apologize again for, cutting the show short yesterday. We got the stuff working today. At the very least, I got the phones working for sure. I cannot tell you the array of different problems I've had, technically. And we're working on, I'm trying to get new computers here and maybe a new mixing board. And it will come together. It's just, I think I have, high expectations of what I can deliver. I feel like I have a responsibility to you. A lot of you folks pay for the show or support the show in other ways. And so that's that. But I just hit a wall yesterday. And so we're doing a little better today. And I appreciate I got just a bunch of emails that were very, very nice and gratifying and much appreciated. I may mention your name in these plugs and notices. I'm going to do another plugs and notices, but I will also tell you that there were some that I couldn't fit in today, and I will do them on Monday. Or maybe I'll even just record another one. We'll see how much time I have this weekend because I've got the kids, and they're going nuts. It's a madhouse. It's a total madhouse. But, Milo is playing the piano, and my son's been challenged to a debate by Ronald Reagan, and I'm going to see if I can get him up here to do it because over Frozen 2. I don't know what to tell you. But we have new plugs and notices music, and we will play that now as I go through these. Little country stylings, a little bit. On March 23rd, an at-home coronavirus test is going to be apparently available. This, according to Time Magazine. It's an Everlywell COVID-19 test. If a telemedicine doctor decides to prescribe it, it will send the kit within 2 days for $135. And customers can pay $30 more to receive the kit overnight. And I'm not sure what the turnaround time is on that. But the test will be available March 23rd, and of course, it should be completely free. It should be completely free. This coming from a listener, Liz. New York State Senator Andrew Gornardez and community group Bay Ridge Cares are spearheading a volunteer drive connecting healthy, asymptomatic volunteers and community with those in high-risk groups who might be unable to leave their homes. Volunteers will be connected with an individual in need of services. This is all for southern Brooklyn. They're also accepting monetary donations and non-perishable items to be distributed at local food banks as well. You can go to bayridgecares.com/donate. bayridgecares.com/donate. To volunteer, you can email GOUNARDES at newyorksenate.gov. GOUNARDES, newyorksenate.gov. We cut these as videos as soon as we're done with the show, so you can go back and check some of these out if you don't get it. Email from Chase, clay artist from Philadelphia. He's got some pretty fun ceramics. Of course, his business is devastated because of what's going on right now. Where do I have those? I had it up here on my... Oh, here it is. It's Wrong World Ceramics. Wrong World Ceramics, spelled just like you would think. And they have a bunch of flasks. Some pretty funny sayings on, and then some really beautiful clay ceramic work. Check it out. Wrong World Ceramics. Meanwhile, shoot, I don't have its name. Connor O'Hanlon emails. He is working on a campaign to unseat Brian Fitzpatrick in Pennsylvania 01. The campaign can be found at Skylar for Congress, SKYLAR for Congress.com. Progressive running in a district that Clinton won, but the Republicans still hold. There's very few of those, if any, except for that one. And he's got a podcast called The Con O Show, the CONOH Show. You can check it out. It's found on Facebook and Twitter. Also, yesterday we talked about Trader Joe's crew need hazard pay. I think in Minnesota, supermarkets are considered essential employees. They should get paid like it then. And you can go to coworker.org, petitions Trader Joe needs hazard pay now. Coworker.org, just search for Trader Joe's crews needs hazard pay now. Meanwhile, the American Guild of Musical Artists, representing ballet dancers, opera singers, symphony musicians, their incomes have been decimated, of course. You can donate to support their relief fund at musicalartists.org, musicalartists.org/membership/AGMA relief fund. I'm sure if you Google musicalartists.org relief fund, you will find it. Also, you can donate at the actorsfund.org as well. My heart belongs to JustCoffee.com, co-op in Wisconsin. They have an established online business. Hopefully, they're staying safe there. I know they are. They're very responsible folks. But also, you can also order coffee from a listener whose brother's gourmet roasting company out of Asbury Park. All the cafes have shut down, and you can order their coffee directly online at maidencoffee.com, MAIDEN coffee.com. Also, check out Invisible Mass Records. They're look them up. They're hurting right now. Alex emails to say that his family's been making high-quality, all-natural soaps and lotions out of our home, and they're ramping up capacity and offering free shipping to get it to as many people as possible. This is a great way to get some soap, folks. ParsonAgeSoap.com. PARSON AgeSoap.com. ParsonAgeSoap.com. Songbird, BYRD, Songbird, BYRD, DC.com, selling vinyl by mail order. They're a music venue, cafe, bar, vinyl shop in Adams Morgan in Washington, D.C. Obviously, they can only do online. Just a shout out in Minneapolis to Vicra's Distillery. They shut down their normal operation and started using their machines to give away hand sanitizers to locals. Shout out to them in Minneapolis, and thanks, Thomas, for... And I want to thank Josh, who drives a truck and delivers caskets. Teacher Sarah, Deborah, and Grandpa Hobo, and others who's just sent very, very kind emails. Much appreciated. That's it for our plugs and notices today. If you want to send me a plugs and notice, send an email at majorityreporters@gmail.com. Put in the subject line, plugs and notices. And we will get those out as soon as we can to you. And that is our plugs and notices for today. Yes, very Uncle Tupelo. All this music is done by Dave Derby, I should say, that we're using on the show. It's the same guy who did Pilot Light. And Dave Derby's a great musician. You can check out, he is Gramercy Arms, the Dam Builders, and some solo stuff. You can find most of that, I think, on iTunes. But he wrote this music for a TV show that I did, which I may be doing more stuff online soon with. I'll talk about that maybe another time. But And he did all these soundtrack songs, and so we have them. We're looping them around, and they all vaguely sound like the kind of music I like, which is like early '90s music, because he knew that's the kind of music I like. And I had all these temp tracks that were all based on that. So there's a little bit of Uncle Tupelo in that, and he did that bombast that we'll play. And this, I don't know. This one's not. I like that one, but that's not reminiscent necessarily of the '90s. Brendan, if there's a way for you to send me a link to that picture, I could get it, but I can't upload it now, of Alex. In fact, we're going to go to Alex Pareene now, and maybe I can find a picture online of him at some. What happened there? The thing went out of focus. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'll be talking to Alex Pareene of the New Republic. Be right back after this. After I do this, wait a second, I forgot. I need to do this and that. And then come over here and use this mouse to do this. All right, we're back. Sam Cedar on the Majority Report. Apologies for taking so long, but I haven't quite, until you go through the process, you forget, like, oh, wait a second. Now when I call up Alex, he's going to be live, so he can't hear me, and we have to communicate through text. And maybe, Brendan, you can tell Brendan James that we're going to have that same problem. On the phone, always a pleasure to welcome to the program. Good friend of the show, I would say, if I could be so bold. He is a political correspondent for the New Republic. Alex Pareene, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Sam.
How you doing, Alex? What have you been up to?
I mean, I'm losing my mind. Like, just to be completely frank, I'm just absolutely losing my mind. What I've been up to is attempting to have a job while my partner has a job, and we raise a 3-year-old.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, it's not hard for me to imagine what a nightmare that is. That is the thing, is that, like, there was no ability to even like plan for this.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? You
Yeah.
just have to, like, it's Friday, everything is normal, and then one day it's like, oh, okay, this is what we're doing here. And
Yeah.
that, I think, makes it harder. I mean, this is obviously like what's going on. So many people are basically dealing with this situation right now, and we're obviously not alone. But it really is, it's pretty nuts.
Mm. Yeah, it's surreal, and like there's not an additional surreal part of it is that there's no one can sort of credibly say when it's done.
Right. And I think that's, one of the things that is, that's one of the things that I think is, is driving everybody crazy. We have no sense of, what the permanence is of this. I started doing this and I thought, okay, I can get by in a week or two, and we'll just have a stripped down show. But by day one, I realized, like, we're going to be up here for longer than that. School, as you know, at the very least, is out till April, in late April in New York City. I have a feeling it's going to be longer than that at this point. But
Yeah.
well, let's start with. I mean, I know you've written about this story, and I wonder if you have the same sort of shock or just like deep pit in your stomach when you see this poll about Donald Trump, where 55%. And there may be some methodology issues with the poll, but there's other polls that sort of suggest that, at the very least, it's split. 50% of the American public thinks that his response to this has been good. And frankly, like, I know you've written about the sort of the dismantling of the state. I read a piece, or at least mentioned that, I think it was Stuart Stevens' piece, where he basically said, like, I'm a Republican. I'm for blame for this. Despite which is the only like decent never Trumper thing that I've read in ages, which is basically like, I created this monster, and and now it's running amok, and sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what
I
do
mean,
we'll go through it. I mean, you can talk about the piece, but I'm also like I'm getting flashes of 9/11 here with Bush. And I'm very worried that if at this point there's not an understanding by the American public that Donald Trump has screwed this up, and it's not even basic incompetence. It's really just sort of like, it's something worse than that. Then I think we're in big trouble.
Yeah, and I don't even really know. I mean, right? It's 9/11 is the sort of correct comparison in the sense that I think what it's reflecting is this tendency to believe that what we need to do in a crisis is rally around the leader. And I think that's insane. Like, that's like that shouldn't be. I just feel like that's an instinct people are going to fall into, and especially they're going to fall into it in the absence of a competing sort of campaign to actually place blame on the people responsible for this.
Yes.
Right. And it seems like, and the governors, for example, are all very busy, like, actually trying to triage the crisis, but there has to be some organized political opposition that can spend time trying to, like, we actually do need to assign blame for this, like, just out of basic responsibility. I don't know. I don't see it happening.
Well, I've got a real long list of why we need to blame out of this, because A, we need to know who we can trust going forward.
Right.
B, Donald Trump really, really wants to stay president. I think even more so than your average power-hungry person, because I think Donald Trump knows that his life after presidency is probably not going to be, fulfilling his dream of, working for Habitat for Humanity. I think it's probably going to be more akin to prosecutions. And I think he has real concerns about that, is my suspicion. And so, having him gain this type of popularity means that he is getting the feeling that he can get away with this. Like, he can get away with saying, we've got 5 million masks and there's no masks and they're not coming for a year and a half. He can get away with saying, the malaria drug, the FDA is screwing up on this. They could do it.
Yeah.
Or the idea that we didn't get the testing, and I still don't think that we know the real reason behind that.
No, I don't think so either. I mean, I don't think we know why. I don't think we know why.
I can take a guess.
Right. I can make guesses too as to why, our duopoly of privately held lab companies have been so vital to the response, and I don't know. We don't have answers, but it's insane, this thing that he is doing. And I this is what I wrote before, which is it was obvious before it actually started overwhelming hospitals. It was obvious Trump thought of it as a messaging problem and something he could just make go away on TV. But the fact is, this is his one trick, and he's still doing it. But it's alarming that it appears to actually be working, which is just going on TV. He just goes on TV, and this is what the poll is reflecting. They see him go on TV, and he says, "Oh, the FDA just approved a miracle drug, and it's gonna cure it." And for him, the unreality of that statement is meaningless. It's completely meaningless for him. The fact that is unreal, but it's consequential. Obviously, that's what people are just sort of getting.
And it's also it's consequential insofar as, in the same way that him calling it a hoax for weeks was, and encouraging Fox News to do so as well, because it is hard enough to get a message. I mean, people spend $1 billion, right, to get their message across to individuals out there. In a presidential campaign, Bloomberg spent $500 million trying to get his message across to just a dozen states or something. It's very difficult to permeate the consciousness of the American public, and it's super difficult to change their minds about something. So when Donald Trump is out there for 4 or 5 weeks saying this is a hoax, there's 50% of the population out there going I'm not taking this seriously. And so, the length of time that they're going out and behaving in a way that is contrary to containing this and not making it a disaster in this country, it's going the wrong direction. And there's no way to sort of contain that quick enough. And it's quite possible, who knows, but it seems like it's quite possible. You and I having this conversation is the actual tragedy is a lagging indicator of where we actually are. Do you know what I mean? Like it's already baked into the cake. Like the fuse has been lit, and we're just waiting for it to explode. And the fuse has been lit. There's no putting it out right now.
Yeah. I mean, and I think since I, started actually getting really worried about this, and it was sort of, I think Chris Hayes has been, first of all, he's been the only sort of decent television broadcaster on this. He sent out the emergency room intake data for flu-like symptoms or respiratory symptoms, and it started spiking March 1, and nothing was in place. I think obviously the fuse was lit, and we missed any chance that we had at a sort of manageable response. I'm worried about, but I think that like we are so. I do think we're so unused to like treating what the media treats as sort of political rhetoric. They're so unused to connecting it to actual reality of life and death that they have not been able to catch up to the sort of meaning of what it means that the government like misled people about what they needed to be doing.
Yeah, and here's the part too that like it's unclear to me. Like, it's unclear to me how much we will know. Like, I mean, like I keep getting these emails, or I see on Twitter, like my son, or I I'm getting emails from people. My son-in-law is a doctor at blank and blank hospital. And he said it's already happening, that they are already making choices about respirators, and yet none of this is being reported. And so you go about your daily life. I mean, as it is, it's a very different daily life, but you think like, okay, I mean, I'm not seeing signs of this happening. Like, I'm looking out my window. I don't see people dropping on the street. And I wonder, like, if we could be going through a horrific nightmare and people not even really realizing the level of horror. And then, well, I got sick for 3 days and, it was bad, but, like, I mean, look, we go through life, and how many people do you know about, know somebody who died of the flu? Now, this could be this ultimately could be 10 times worse than that. Maybe even more than that, because it's 10 times more deadly. But even then, I have no sense of like, unless it gets to those numbers, will people understand what's going on here? And they'll be like, well, why can't I go out? After like 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever, why can't I go out? Like, I don't know anybody who died. I don't have a sense. Maybe we will all know somebody. I don't know.
I mean, it seems like in the worst case scenario, I think it will be likely that everyone will know somebody. Everyone has, or nearly everyone has, relatives who are older and people who are immunocompromised. But I don't know. I think that's like, I don't have a sense. Right. So like, I don't have a great sense of what, we're in New York where things have been locked down for a while and life is clearly different. I don't have a great sense of how life is being lived elsewhere. I think a lot of places have started closing schools and things like that. But it does seem like it's very likely it's in a lot of communities where most people don't know it's in their community and don't know how much it's spreading. But I don't know, it'll be hard this might be a thing where just because, and this is getting back to the sort of question of assigning political responsibility for it, it'll be a hard thing too, where to say that while this was to some extent a natural disaster, like there were political ways it could have been contained and then mitigated that didn't happen. Like that,
it's Katrina if, in many respects, if George Bush had like secretly, blown up the levees.
Right. Yeah.
And, or at the very least weakened the levees. Never mind had a poor response to that, but like literally his, pre-response essentially created an even more catastrophic situation.
I was thinking this morning, like what if instead of just ignoring the bin Laden determined to attack U.S. memo, instead of just ignoring it, Bush had like divested himself of New York real estate
Right.
Like he had done that.
Or basically said, hey, you know what I'm doing in response to this? Firing the head of counterterrorism. We don't need it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We don't need it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the amazing thing about it. Like, if there was a guy on the who sat on the National Security Council, whose job it was to coordinate the response to a pandemic, he would be going in January, and apparently, Richard Burr was confident enough that this was going to be like the 1918 pandemic that he was telling his donors, sell your stocks essentially.
Yeah.
In late February, presumably, it wasn't like, oh, I found this out yesterday. He may have had a little time to marinate before he decides to share with his donors. I imagine that the guy whose job it is to watch out for pandemics would have been on top of this a month and a half earlier. January 1st, late December, he's tracking it. As soon as it pops up, he is aware of it. He's in there going like, you guys, you don't understand what's going on here. Here's a PowerPoint demonstration. And everybody on the National Security Council becomes aware that this is happening. And there's more pressure on Trump to be like, hey, this is for real, man. Even that, even if that guy wasn't fired and his whole team wasn't fired, never mind, and that was a decision by the Republican Party. That was not just a Trump decision. He tried to play it off the other day. Like, I don't know, somebody did it probably, but did you do it, Bill? And it was one of those jobs. I mean, this is just, it's stunning. It's stunning. And it's stunning that that we're seeing polls like this.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is, it is like everyone should be just completely alarmed at how hollowed out and ineffective the state is instead of being like, well, they're showing good resolve or whatever, I don't even really know. It's hard to actually get across the degree to which we had a chance to contain this and we didn't. And I guess I'm worried now. I sort of was like, well, this is the end of people having any faith in institutions. But I'm like legitimately worried that people will be like, no one could have foreseen this and everyone tried their best. Which is insane.
Right. It's a failure of imagination. That's what we're going to get. We're going to get the same line that we got from from the Bush administration during 9/11. It's a failure of imagination, even though, Condi Rice was at a Genoa conference and was on a boat because they were afraid that something like that was going to happen at that conference instead of actually being in Genoa. I mean, and it's a failure of imagination because you fired the guy whose job it is to pay attention to this shit.
Yeah.
Like it's a failure of imagination for people who don't lead teams to deal and track pandemics. But it's not, but that's why you have someone like that in that position. And I feel like that's just another story that's just down the wormhole, right? Like,
right. Yeah.
There should be, these news organizations should be not donating, basically allocating entire episodes essentially to just doing that one story so that people understand the context in which we were completely unprepared for this.
Yeah. And at the same time too, this is what I said about the Democratic response is that there should have been some top Democrat on TV every day for the last 2 weeks yelling, where are the tests? Why don't we have tests? What happened to them? Where are they? And just to prompt people to pay attention and prompt news organizations again to invest in reporting in what exactly happened with the tests, why we never could use a WHO test. These are questions that they're going to be, and I'm now terrified they're going to be assigned to the, well, it's too late to play the blame game category, and it's time to move forward, not backwards line. And I can just see that happening.
Well, let's talk about that briefly. Who would be really good to do this would be I mean, Chuck Schumer his response has been, I don't know. I mean, I've watched some of his speeches on the Senate floor, and he just doesn't have he's just not the person to do this, and neither is Nancy Pelosi, frankly.
No,
you
they're
know who
not,
would be perfect to do this? Would be a very dynamic presidential candidate and presumptive nominee for the Democratic Party would be out there doing this. I mean, if Joe Biden does not have the energy to do this,
right?
And I don't know, has he come out with a plan?
There's something on his website. I think I saw a thing on his website like a week ago or something, but I don't know. Like, he hasn't, obviously it's been days since he's been in front of a camera, so he's not telling us about his plan.
I mean, I saw Bernie came out, he gave his speech, he said $2,000 a month, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I think that's ended up very close to what the Congressional Progressive Caucus has called for. But Bernie is, not the presumptive nominee at this point.
Right.
And Joe Biden is. And where the F is Joe Biden? Like, this is what everybody's concern was about this guy, is that, it's one thing that he doesn't have to campaign, but he needs to, they keep telling us like he's moving into the general election. If he's moving into the general election, he needs to be out there right now pushing Donald Trump.
Yes.
And
putting
I mean, this is absurd. It's absurd.
Like, he needs to be, again, he just needs to be on TV every single day, linking the name Donald Trump to failed response in the minds of people. Like, that's just job number one. He's supposed to be the Democratic nominee in a presidential election year. There's a disaster happening. The president bears personal responsibility for the response. Where is he?
And this is like, I mean, I remember that sort of that famous saying by Barack Obama to Barney Frank, when Barney Frank had gone to Hank Paulson and said, "Hey, instead of giving money to the banks, give the money to the homeowners, and they'll pay the banks." And Paulson said, "You know what? I'm good with that. We just need President-elect Obama to sign off on it." And Barney Frank went to Obama, and Obama said, "There's only one president at a time, Barney." And then Bush was like, "Well, if Obama doesn't sign off on it, then let's just give it to the banks." And that's basically where the stimulus, that whole bailout started with the Fed, and that became the norm. I mean, I think it was inexcusable then for Obama to do that, right? Like, if there's one president at the time, then that president can make the decision. But you're being asked to sign off and give your opinion and see if you're comfortable with it. And in retrospect, I think that was just Obama's way of saying, like, how can I get away with this and not okay it, but not veto it, essentially.
Right. Yeah.
But this is a very, very different situation where you cannot take that tact. And if you're not going to take that tact, I mean, Joe Biden should be out there right now. If he is the presumptive nominee, and it appears he is, and he certainly thinks he is, and we're certainly being told this is all about the general election, what he should be doing out there is saying, look, I'm naming the first person to my cabinet, Ron Klain. He dealt with the Ebola thing. Now, all the people in the know, suspect that's what's going to happen, but he should just do that right now so that he can create basically a shadow administration to basically, because this isn't just about like electoral politics. This is about forcing Donald Trump and the government to respond in a real way, not in a, we got a malaria drug and what do you call it? I was listening to Alex Jones and he says that will work. So where's the FDA on this? Like, we need something real going on.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. And because, and someone, it's not just the job of fact checkers on Twitter to be like, hey, the thing the president said about the hospital ship, like, that wasn't real. Like, if that happens, that'll be a few weeks from now. Yep. Like, someone needs to act, like, Democrats and Biden, like, obviously, like you said, like, I mean, Schumer is operating at the absolute peak, like, the best he can do. This is like absolutely the best he can do. And we can't expect more than this from Chuck Schumer. He put out a readout of a call where he told the president to ramp up the defense production.
Get
act.
on the ball,
All right.
bucko.
Yeah, exactly. Pelosi, she's fixated on means testing the response or whatever the hell she's doing. I don't know. But there needs to be someone saying the president is not when he says things, you cannot believe them. You cannot trust him. He's not showing leadership. He's being the exact same person he's always been. And and this time the consequences are life and death. This is again I don't know. They're leaving it as usual. They feel like their job is to leave that to neutral third parties to point out, and then get annoyed when they're not doing it effectively enough.
Right. We've outsourced our opinion to Glenn Kessler or whoever it is at the WAPO for Pinocchios, and we're really riding this guy to make sure that he gets it right. For the record, Joe Biden should be out there every day with a 5 p.m. press conference.
Yes.
Basically saying, here's the new information that we have. Here is what we implore the president must do. Here is where we feel he's not being straight with the American public. The American public deserves better than what's on the table right now and deserves better than the information and misinformation they're getting. Here's the real stuff. Ron, step over to the podium, deliver it. I'm going to stand right next to you as if I'm the president. I mean, this is...
Yeah.
I mean, it's not... I mean, yes, would it be helpful from an electoral standpoint? I'm sure. But this is needed because there's no, Glenn Kessler at the Washington Post giving 4 Pinocchios to Donald Trump's latest thing, or hedging. Well, technically, there are some people. There is a scientist, who is in a castle in France saying, try malaria drugs. So I'm only going to give this a half of Pinocchio, whatever it is. There needs to be a political force, someone creating, because Donald Trump responds to where he thinks he is with the public. This poll is not only dispiriting and disturbing in terms of what it says about the American public, but I'm terrified about how he reads this.
Yeah.
He's like, this is working, guys. Just come up with something else for me to say tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Just give me a line. Just give me something to claim tomorrow that'll dominate TV headlines for an hour or two. And it doesn't matter if it is real or not.
I mean, go ahead.
I was thinking back to Katrina too, because I just used a comparison to another thing I wrote a while ago, but that was treated. That became a problem for Bush, not when and because Democrats did anything, but because Anderson Cooper went to New Orleans and said, "My God, this is a disaster." That's when it actually became a problem. And I'm just feeling okay, do we need a news anchor to start blaming the president because Democrats won't do it? I don't really know.
I mean, this has been a problem that they have had throughout. I mean, they were late in the impeachment thing. And it wasn't until, they basically came out and where public sentiment went against the president in terms of him being impeached. Now, of course, he got a slight bump after impeachment, but ask Susan Collins and Joni Ernst how that went.
Yeah.
And I would also say that, I don't know. I mean, I think there's a lot of I think a lot of people are going to come out and they're going to vote against Donald Trump. But I am really nervous about how just even these polls embolden this lunatic. And
right.
And then I would add on top of this, I don't know. I have not seen what Schumer has said about what we know of these senators who we got Richard Burr,
who liquidated their holdings last month.
Lafleur, Inhofe, Perdue, Johnson, and I suspect Dianne Feinstein. There's been some talk. I haven't seen specific reporting on this, but there may be more Democrats. And this is the thing that the Republicans. You see Tucker Carlson out there, talking about Burr needs to be arrested and Lafleur needs to go down. Burr and Lafleur are, are basically cinema and mansion to those people.
Yeah. Exactly.
They're cinema and mansion. And it's like, we need to be able, and Feinstein, I would say also, like, that's a blue state. There's not going to be, we're not going to get a Republican there. If any of these senators sold, their stocks of any significant amount, like, I don't know how, if they have their, managers, periodically sell stocks or whatever, but if there's like a significant amount of stock that was sold by these people, they should all be forced to resign.
Yes.
Democrats should be holding hearings in the House. They should be calling for the resignations in the Senate. These people need to go. Like,
and
they
the thing
did
is, like,
not
they're gonna
tell us.
Yeah. They're going to treat it as a narrowly legal question of whether the law was violated. And they're going to say, oh, well, it'll be an ethics investigation or something. But, like, no, like, you need to treat it as if no matter what the extenuating circumstances are, you need to treat it as a problem. And the other problem is they set precedent for this when they welcomed Menendez back with open arms.
Yeah.
They didn't, and Menendez, again, blue state, could have been replaced. Not if there had been an open election for that seat, would have been replaced by a better senator. Like, just would have been. Same with Feinstein. But they're this, like, the incumbent protection is their overriding concern over nearly everything else.
Yeah,
and Republicans don't think that way. They are willing to throw people overboard. They are more than willing to throw people overboard.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. I mean, we're seeing it with the Lafleur. They want Collins in Georgia, and they would love to get rid of Burr. He'll be appointed by a Republican, or what is it? He'll be appointed. Burr would be appointed, I think, by a Democratic governor. I'm not sure, but it has to be from the same party. So it has to be a Republican. But you get a better Republican, I guess, than Burr. I mean, I don't know how much better, but some better. I don't know.
Right.
But this is stunning. This is just stunning incompetence and just sort of the Democratic leadership is just bad. They're bad at this. Like, they just it's one step forward, two steps back with them, because there's always stuff that they're not, like they're undercutting even the decent things that they do. They undercut it politically, and also just sort of like, I don't know, ethically. But they have to be willing, and maybe Chuck Schumer sold stocks. I don't know, but this is and frankly, like, you don't even need to call hearings. You just keep calling for their resignation. And then you ask them, say, well, can we have an ethics hearing? Why? We don't need to. We know what you did.
We know what you did.
Horrible. Resign.
Yeah.
There is no no debating about this. What you did was a disservice to the American public. You held back on this information, and it wasn't because you weren't confident about it. You sold stock based upon it. You told donors based upon it.
Yeah.
I mean, can folks imagine just for a moment, like, whenever they knew this, if Burr went out and said the president is not being forthright with the American public, I believe we are looking at a pandemic, the likes of which we have not seen since 1918, which infected 500 million people across the world. It killed like 650,000 Americans. It killed several million, more, 5 million, maybe 20 million across the world. I mean, this is it just blows my mind, right? Like, this is no wonder why people think that half these creatures are changelings and they're all part of like some type of secret cabal.
Yeah. And like that, like, they're it would have been, my God, if in February, any Republican senator in February, if they had been basically like sounding the panic button, it would have been huge.
Yep.
It would have been huge. If they had been saying, like, we need to be panicking about this. We're not ready. We're doing nothing to prepare. The CDC test doesn't work. Like, we had a lot of time when they knew how bad this could get, when nothing was being done to address that.
And I still feel like from a federal response, we're not, I mean, have you seen that video of the kids at, in Florida?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
incredibly disturbing. I don't.
Right.
My capacity to play video is extremely limited at the moment. But
Oh God, people are people are watching this, aren't they? I was like, oh.
well, they can't see you.
Yeah, right.
But I don't have the most flattering picture of you up there. I've got like 2 images. I mean, you look good in it. You probably look better than you do now. I mean, that's going to be the hardest part of this for me. Is just like, you know, I mean, fortunately, I'm just in my underwear right now.
Right.
Wearing my top shirt. But by I think in a week or 2, I'm just going to be, you know, showing up in like you know, one of those like you know, sleeveless T-shirts and
Right.
God knows.
Yeah.
But
We'll all be cutting our own hair.
well, that's actually going to be an issue for me too. So, all right. So let me ask you this: like, what? I mean, I feel like we could have another talk, and maybe we will again soon about just sort of like this experience. I mean, I don't have a sense of how many people are doing this. You know, most of the people I talk to are in big cities, although, and you know, I'm upstate, outside of New York now, and I can tell you like. I went to the Home Depot yesterday to get some lumber and some tools. I got very frustrated yesterday with my setup, and so I went out and just cut some stuff and pruned some trees and stuff like that. And there was only about like 4 people in the whole Home Depot. And
Wow.
but at the same time, like none of the people working there are wearing gloves. They're
Yeah.
not like, you know. Nobody there is, you know, keeping 6 feet away, you know, and I'm just like trying to have a conversation with them and just going, you know, put my arm up in front of a face, you know, so it's still that sort of sense of like, I don't want to be the, you know, the weird guy who's all paranoid about this. But
Yeah.
I mean, I kept
Yeah.
my distance. I also saw something that, you know, and I've been to this store many times and maybe I just didn't notice. There's not many people there, but I saw 3 people drive up. They got out of their car. They were young, probably in their 20s, maybe. 2 men and a woman. One of the man and the woman went in one entrance. The man went in the other. And I was just looking at it. I was like, there's something strange about what was going on. And I was loading stuff up. And they come running out of the store from different sides. Their shirts filled with junk. And they jump in the car and speed off.
Wow.
And they take off.
Yeah.
And I tried, you know, I tried to get their license number, but they were, you know, like,
Right.
I mean, you know, and I don't know if that happens every day at that store or if we're watching something that's, you know, changing. But it's also hard when you're in a rural area to get a sense of like what other people are doing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, it's surreal in New York right now, because you know the streets are empty, and obviously I got sick a week ago. I've been like isolating myself, so you know my sense of what is going on in the world is through my window mostly. But I've been taking walks at night, staying away from people, and like it's funny because the bodega's still open. I could still go in there and get toilet paper even.
Right.
But things are just are otherwise shut down. Out in Minnesota, my mom is still going to work, but I feel like that's going to get shut down soon too. She's like the only one in her office, basically. But it's that's the weirdest part is like you don't know how other people are experiencing this really, and you don't know what like if, you know, I heard a party on my block 2 nights ago. But you know, at the same time, like most people are staying home, but it's just such a like impossible thing to wrap your mind around that you don't really know what, you know, how other people are actually dealing with it.
What's also, I think, true is that I would bet that every single person at that party was without child.
Yeah. Oh, of course. Yeah. Absolutely.
And, you know, I mean, this is, you know, you know, there's always like a difference between sort of like cohorts in society, but now it seems to be very distinct. Like, I think that the people who are going out the most are younger people without children and older people who are just like, I'm at the end of my life and, you know, I'm not going to spend I'm not going to spend it inside or something like that. I mean, because there's
Right.
no real sense of like how bad this is or that, how it could be contained. I don't know. I don't know. And maybe it's just like I got 2 kids and I know most of the people I know at least. Well, no, I mean, I talk to people who don't have kids too on a regular basis, maybe more so. And it's a outside of New York, it's a very different dynamic. And I also hope that we don't get into one of these situations where like, prior to 9/11, it was much more intense and some of that had been coming back. The old like, who cares about New York thing and F
Yeah,
those
totally.
people.
Yeah.
And I wonder if there is a cockiness about like, at least I'm not in New York, screw those
Yeah.
guys.
Yeah.
We'll see. But
I mean, I get the impression that the fact that the New York response, I think the New York preparation deserves to come in for a lot of criticism, but the fact that the response has been so aggressive, which includes ramping up testing, just means that what is happening in New York is just a more accurate picture of where a lot of other places are going to be. That's my fear. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I think your assessment of that is well. I mean, they canceled school right around where I think they should have. Like
Yeah.
there was talk that they wouldn't, but they did, and for whatever reasons, I was surprised they didn't have like a plan already on the shelf for like, hey, if we ever have to. But part of it is like, one wonders what that head of the pandemic, sort of central command in our federal government would have been doing. Like, hey, New York, you guys,
Right.
I want to see your annual plan or whatever it is. I mean, I don't know.
I want to see your plan for when you have to close the schools. I want to see your plan for getting, Cuomo's been banging about hospital beds, which is the number one thing you should be worried about. But like, what was the plan to bring in more hospital beds over the last month?
Yeah.
And that again, that maybe that would have been the guy in Washington's job would have been to call Governor Cuomo in January and say, what is your plan to quickly get 1,000 more hospital beds?
Well, it's going to be ugly, and there's really not much else we can do except for, stay away from people, stay in your home. I hope you feel better, Alex. And, we got to let people know who's responsible for the failure of response here.
Yep.
And, I hope Joe Biden, finds it within him to, to do set up a video camera in his house every day and do this. Zoom
Seriously.
in, Klain if he has to, but
yeah, he should call into your show.
Yeah, no kidding. All right. Well, Alex Pareene, thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Of course, Sam.
Feel better. Stay safe.
Yeah, thank you. You too.
Right, bye-bye. All right, folks. We're going to take a quick break, and when I come back, we're going to be talking to Brendan James. He is the creator of Blowback podcast. I think I said earlier, Blockback. And he is a former Trap House producer, and we'll have him in just a moment as I first do this here. And then I do this. We- We are back. Sam Cedar on the Majority Report on the phone. If I'm lucky, we have with us Brendan James. He, of course, is the former Chapo Trap House producer and creator of the Blowback podcast. Brendan, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. How you doing, Sam?
I am better now that I've actually got you on the phone. And you
Yeah,
actually,
me
you
too.
actually sound great.
Thanks. I've got my iPod headphones on, which is the state-of-the-art technology as far as I'm concerned.
Right, the earbuds.
Yeah, like with the microphone on the wire. That's I think
No, that's much better. That's much better.
Yeah.
The earbud, the whatever the just the Bluetooth ones stink for this.
No. Oh, I don't mess around with those at all. No.
All right. Well, you sound great.
Thank you. You too.
And I appreciate you doing this.
Of course.
Well, we're at our tech is a little bit dicey. And
Sure.
I would have, yeah, but you're here, and
Yeah.
congratulations.
Oh, thanks. My tech is iffy too. I'm calling from a new house I just bought in the Berkshires. I cashed out on some stock in January from a little tip, maybe from a certain congressperson, and so I'm sort of doing a bit of a slapdash arrangement here myself.
Congratulations to you. That's very
Thanks.
exciting.
It has nothing to do with the current public health crisis. I just want to make that clear. The stocks were completely unrelated, and I'm innocent.
Innocent of. Okay.
Nothing in particular. We can move past it. Actually, forget it. Forget I said that.
I mean, you guys are pretty plugged in over there.
Yeah, definitely. But no, thank you. Yeah, the new podcast is exciting, and I'm glad you had me on to chat about it.
So let's talk about this new podcast, Blowback.
Yeah.
What the heck does that mean?
Well, Blowback's the CIA's term. There's a guy named Chalmers Johnson who wrote a bunch of books on it. It's
interviewed Chalmers Johnson many times, actually, back in the old Majority Report. Yes, about that very topic.
Yeah. So for those who aren't aware, Blowback is a sort of umbrella term for unintended consequences that come about as a result of, in this context, U.S. foreign policy. That when we pursue our interests, or when we think we're pursuing our interests as an empire, we end up committing to things that come back and bite us in the ass in a big way. An example, one of the most popular examples, would be the idea of arming the Islamic militants in Afghanistan in the 80s to get one over on the Soviet Union, who we hated so much, and then watching them slowly mutate into both a mixture of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, who then obviously came into a bit of a nasty conflict with America a couple years down the line. So we decided to name our show Blowback to take a look at different examples of this phenomenon.
So, all right. So what are the different examples? I mean, how is this structured? Are you doing like almost like seasons, like a series of episodes on one particular period or something like that, or how does it work?
Well, this first season, this is a proof of concept, so we'll see if we even have a future after this one. Maybe it'll really stink, but we've done our first season on the Iraq War. That is the subject of this show in this first run. It's a limited run of 10 episodes, and we just try to take. It's a little maybe overambitious. We try to take you from A to Z on the Iraq War, which I think is a pretty clear example of Blowback. I think most people vaguely know that we were a friend and ally of Saddam Hussein in the 80s. We actually uncovered that it was even earlier than that. But we then turned on him quite deliberately in the 90s, slapped some horrible sanctions on his country throughout the 90s under both the first Bush administration and the Clinton administration, which teed us up in 2003 to invade and point the finger at Saddam for maybe doing 9/11, but also having WMD and a bunch of cooked up intel. So this is obviously a journey in which we see musical chairs happen about who's our enemy, who's our friend. Give weapons. We sold him anthrax. Next thing you know, we're accusing him of sending anthrax to the United States. After 9/11, it's a big mess, and we want to try and take it apart and see all the nasty stuff that we did, and that by the way that we still live with, and that still reverberates and shapes our reality today. I think is a big part of the show.
Do you guys get into like the Project for New American Century? And all the neocons, or is it basically once we land there and it's all like Dan Senor and who was the first CPA guy? I can't remember now.
Well, there was a kind of a beta program named
Garner.
Jay Garner.
Yes.
Jay Garner, yeah.
And Garner was actually a decent guy, and that's why they got rid of him, I think, in a couple of months. Is that right? Do I have that right?
Well, I mean, he was a defense contractor goblin, in my opinion. He made his living off of designing Patriot missile targeting systems at that point. But yes, I mean, compared to his successor and a lot of the people around him, I would say he's more kind of just like Jack Lemmon in Glengarry Glen Ross.
Right.
He's kind of like a hapless old timer that they put out to pasture in a very weird choice to run Iraq for a little bit, because he saw that this was turning into a huge disaster and was not clear on why his calls for, this may ring true to people right now, why his calls for aid and billions of dollars needed for infrastructure to handle a crisis, why those were not being met, and was certainly more sympathetic in that regard. However, once he came back home, he basically went into hiding and hid from the press and from anyone in the Bush administration because he just didn't want to have to talk about it or be asked about how badly it might have gone. And when he did have a meeting with President Bush at the time, he said, yeah, everything's going great, actually. You guys are cleaning up over there. Good luck. And he didn't tell him any of the ingredients for a giant civil war that he saw brewing during his time. So we correct the record on Jay Garner a little bit, but compared to his successor, yes, he had a good head on his shoulders.
And so wait, so when does the podcast start? Like like temporarily, or is it
right?
Okay, so when does it start?
Our first episode is actually, we go back a bit. We try to give you this background context from the Cold War. So we sort of tee you up to understand our long rap sheet over there. And so the first episode is a lot of that. We talk about a little bit the British colonialism, because we inherited Iraq as an imperial interest from the British. And we talk about Cold War politics. Iraq had a pretty vibrant communist party that was very popular and that was a really important part of the development of that country after they shook the British out in the 50s. And so they were a target for us. We helped the Ba'ath Party, Saddam's party, get into power. We team up with Saddam against Iran in the 80s, and that's where the first episode ends. Second episode is Gulf War, because I think you really have to understand how much we ravaged the country in the 90s. And then after that, the rest of the show takes up from 9/11 onward, and it's like the Iraq War proper. So we go back a ways in the first episode, but then after that, we take you to about ISIS in like 2014. That's where the show kind of puts a pin in the narrative.
And so how many episodes is that? And does this come out on a weekly basis, or can you binge listen?
I wish you could binge, but we have 10 episodes in total, and it's on Stitcher Premium. So it's going to be behind the Stitcher Premium paywall for a while.
Ooh.
Eventually, it'll be public. But if people want to sign up, I should say this now probably. It's pretty easy. Just go to StitcherPremium.com, and you can enter the code Blowback for a free month of listening. And there's 10 episodes that'll be coming out weekly.
So you can try it out. You can
try it out.
4 episodes and see if they're
precisely. And we have a free giveaway episode as well, actually featuring, I believe, your buddy John Benjamin, John Benjamin, and he plays Saddam Hussein in a little sketch I wrote at the very top of the episode. That's familiar. A teaser.
I am excited about Adomian.
Yes, Adomian plays George W. Bush. He was the only guy that I really trusted to play Bush.
Well, he was doing it back in the day, actually.
Yeah.
And I think we actually may have had him on our show, Janine and I, on the radio show as Bush.
Oh, that's great.
I think he called in at one point, and he was great. Now, that is very exciting to me. This other guy that you're talking about, I'm not sure I quite get.
Well, he's alt comedy. He's kind of anti-comedy, John. And I understand if he's not
Yeah,
to
I
your
know what that
taste.
means. Not funny.
Yeah. Well, people are going to have to tune in and listen. I would say give him a chance, but you've heard it here from Sam. Maybe fast forward past that guy. But once you do, our free episode it just kind of situates people in it. We front load some of the funnier or more absurd trivia, but we try to provide some context about the rogues gallery of the Bush administration that we'll be spending our journey with, in the actual main 10 episodes. So for people out there, give the free episode a listen, but then to really hear the show proper, you got to sign up on Stitcher Premium.
There is a quality about what was going on there in terms of their staffing that is very similar to what we're seeing now in the Trump administration, right?
Oh, sure.
Right. It's just like we don't care how unqualified you are. We don't even look at qualifications. We look at loyalty, and we're going to send anybody we can find over there. I mean, we have right now the office in the administration that staffs all the federal workers is run by a 24-year-old with literally college seniors working for him.
Now, that's a great point. One thing, again, that we really want to hit home with the show is not to at all marginalize or play down the catastrophe that the Trump administration, as we're seeing more every day, as he would say, is shaping up to be. But there is a continuity between not only the policies and the conservative, agenda that's still being executed by the Trump administration, but the style. I mean, as you point out, not just in the administration at home, but particularly in the occupation of Iraq.
Yep.
The Bush administration famously redirected the applications to, for gophers wanting to work at the Heritage Foundation and all these other ghoulish think tanks on the right. They were bypassed and went straight to the Office of Iraq Occupation in Baghdad.
This is the Coalition Provisional Authority, right? Is that what it was, the CPA?
Correct. The CPA, otherwise known as Can't Produce Anything or Children Playing as Adults, by people who were on the ground in Iraq, the CPA. And one reason it was called that was because you had people fresh out of college and right-wing ideologues, kids fresh out of college, in particular, Republican henchmen's kids, designing the Iraqi traffic system and the Constitution. And there was one 24-year-old who single-handedly was put in charge of redesigning Iraq's stock market. And he became drunk with power and thought he was, creating the edifice for a whole new computerized system in the Middle East. Didn't end up happening. And in fact, all of this, the result was what you would expect from a bunch of insane neocon ideologues up top and a bunch of weird, horny college grads executing orders at the bottom.
One of the agendas of those people, if I remember correctly, and I think Naomi Klein wrote an amazing piece about this, and I remember talking to her about it, was Baghdad Year Zero, I think it was called. And it was basically this whole notion that they were going to, that they perceive this as sort of like the libertarian conservative economic, sort of grand experiment. Like we have
utopia.
Yes. Like we're starting at a complete baseline, and we're just going to create a legit free market type of utopia, as you say.
Yeah.
And that did not go well.
No, it's one of the big blemishes on the record of those who wished to turn Iraq into that kind of paradise and realign the Middle East into an American, kind of federation of friendly states. The occupation, or rather the invasion, one of its main goals was, yes, to construct a, obviously, first and foremost, friendly to America regime, but that meant opening up Iraq to the world market, obliterating any kind of state-run enterprises or subsidies that were, rationed to people in Iraq. Of course, most importantly, cracking open Iraq's oil industry to those giants like Exxon and Total Oil and other places like that. Now, they had a measure of success with that because there were a lot of, they did tear down. I didn't realize Naomi had had a project referencing it as Year Zero. We call episode 6 about the occupation and Paul Bremer's CPA. We call it Year Zero. I should have done more homework. I didn't realize someone had already used that, but it was Year Zero, much like the Khmer Rouge tore down any possible edifice of the old society. We did that. But the director of economic development in Iraq, it was so called, this guy was someone who was happy in the chaos after the invasion that people were stealing state buses and vehicles and buildings because it was, as Marx would put it, primitive accumulation. It was the beginning of removing public assets from the state and putting them in entrepreneurs' hands. What a lot of other people saw as a horrifying chaos that we were enabling, they saw as the beginning of, a privatization program. And of course, there were all kinds of attempts to privatize Iraq's economy. Some were successful, some weren't. None produced any good for the people of Iraq. But the oil industry was never turned over to private hands. There was a law that was written by Bearing Point, the American consultancy, but the Iraqis never let them carry it out. So there were private partnerships that we tried to, shove in there, and Exxon and some of those other guys, they still wet their beaks. But it may never be the case that the invasion got what it really wanted out of that oil industry. So yeah, it's not to say in recounting all this that we did everything we wanted to do. Capital doesn't always pull off the job, but we certainly tried like hell.
Right. I mean, it's a lot. The level of incompetence. They could have a desire and break things. I mean, I think that there was multiple agendas, and
yes.
And give me your sense of because Paul Wolfowitz famously said, I think it was in a Senate hearing, weapons of mass destruction was one thing that we could all agree on.
Yeah.
But everybody who came to the table, a lot of these neocons like Wolfowitz and
Doug
Feith, but also Pearl,
yep.
And Cheney. They all had, and there were others who all had their own sort of agenda and reason for doing it. Like the Project for a New American Century, I think, saw the geopolitical. Basically, they saw it as a bulwark against China and a way to sort of maintain the U.S. as a hyperpower.
Yes.
And allow these low-level conflicts to exist all around the world. And I think the idea was largely, in part, let's enrich our own multinational corporations. But I think even more importantly than that, I think the ultimate goal was an attempt to we control the spigot. We don't necessarily need the oil from there, but we just want to make sure that if China is in a position that they need the oil, that we can control the flow of oil so that we can dictate. It just gives us an economic and maybe a military, just sort of a power dynamic. And it's,
I couldn't have put it better because, in the show, it's largely, a narrative, but we do stop and try to analyze some of these moments. And for me, no blood for oil, perfectly good slogan during a rally. Absolutely nothing against that as kind of, a placard analysis. But ultimately, the idea of oil being so necessary to extract from the Middle East, that's actually an argument fabricated by those in power to justify these adventures when they know it's not really true. Of course, we get most of our oil from Canada, et cetera, et cetera. So the actual point of it, as you just laid out perfectly, would be to control the spigot. It's about control rather than the per se
material
resource
gains.
Exactly. Yes. Exactly. And that's always been imperialism. And that's really the name of the game when you're talking about Iraq, just as if you were talking about the Raj in India or anywhere else. It's mostly about your leverage and your control. Part of that is just a negative mobilization against any potential great power rival or whatever, or regional, troublemaker that you see as the great I am. So yes. Now, as far as the different levels of ideology or motivation, I agree. We try to take some of that apart as well, because you had the neocons like Wolfowitz. These were the hyper, if you like, idealists who at least couched their project in terms of democracy spreading and all that stuff. I think that you could peel that away to see what you said about just wanting to retain superpower status. And in that sense, they fit like a glove with the agenda of the Cheneys and the Rumsfelds, who were a little bit less like proper neocons and more just like classic American imperial architects who wanted to maybe improve the system. Rumsfeld famously wanted to streamline the Defense Department, streamline our presence abroad. But the neocons were they had all the brainiacs in place to carry out that case. And then you had just kind of if you like, Jacksonian or whatever guys who were just American hyper patriots like John Bolton, who just want to blow anyone up, who looks like a threat, and who actually didn't have a whole lot of time for the nation building and the democracy building that the other guys talked a lot of highfalutin stuff about. We talk about the Project for New American Century, but did you ever, actually, you know what? I don't even know if we would go into it that much because we try to uncover these lesser known things. Did you ever hear about the Bletchley Park 2 operation in the Bush administration?
The Bletchley Park 2? No.
Yeah, this was I think Wolfowitz ran, and Bletchley Park, for those who don't know, it was the kind of brain trust that the British assembled in World War II. Alan Turing, it's where he cracked a lot of the Nazi codes, etc. And so, incredibly pretentiously, the Bush administration called this Bletchley Park 2 after 9/11. It was a brain trust formed of like Paul Wolfowitz and Fareed Zakaria's friends, who wanted to design, much along the lines of a New American Century type deal, the way forward. Do we hit Egypt? Do we hit Syria? Do we hit Iran? And we take a look at that, and they basically lay out that Iran is the main goal.
But they were saying Syria comes next, and then we go to Iran.
Yeah. It was basically Iraq is the weakest at this point because of the horrifying sanctions we imposed throughout the 90s. It was a tin pot dictatorship at that stage. Then Syria, then Iran. But they admit in this document, or in this, in this brain trust, this spitballing session, that Egypt and Saudi Arabia are the main sources of the terrorists that not only hit us on 9/11, but that more generally tend to crop up in the radical Islamist movement that had been present throughout the 90s and the early 2000s. But that basically you can't do anything about them. Oh, who knows? It's real messy, and we need to focus on places we can do something about, which is Iraq. And then eventually, of course, the grand neocon project that we still see today, in no small part due to the aftershocks of the Iraq War, is to take out Iran and the Islamic Republic, which is why we teamed up with Saddam in the first place in the 80s.
If I remember correctly, Rumsfeld at one point, I think it was Rumsfeld who said, like, yeah, we went after Iraq because it was like basically a soft target.
Yes.
And
yes.
And that so if you want to know where that mentality comes from, in terms of like gun control, it's just sort of like the idea is, oh, well, of course you go for the weakest member, regardless of as to whether there's any reason to do that.
Yes.
And I also should say that I think my analogy with the spigot was always like, you want to be at a party where your buddy is basically pumping the keg.
Yep.
And you're not going to get all the beer, but whenever you want some, it's there. And if that jerk shows up at the party and you don't want him to get any beer or her to get any
John
beer.
Benjamin shows up
if
at the
John
party.
Benjamin shows up and starts trying like a beer hog like he usually does, you can just tell the keg guy, like, knock it off.
Cut him off.
All right, so here's one more question for you. The billions of dollars that were in duffel bags that they took off, I think it was like some type of cargo plane. They literally started off with like just duffel bags of cash that they just handed out. And nobody ever, there was no accounting for it. There was no receipts. Did they ever even come up with a theory as to where all that money went?
As far as I know, I mean, there are pockets that you can see. It's likely they went. I mean, a lot of it went to honestly just paying off a bunch of militants. Some of it went to the black hole of corruption that existed in post-war Iraq. We still don't know where. I'm looking at an article. I pulled it up as you were speaking. The $17 billion that was earmarked for developing Iraq. Called the Development Fund of Iraq in 2004, $17 billion just gone. We still don't know where it is, and that's money that's owed to the Iraqis. No, we simply don't really know. And a big part of the show that I'll add that we want to get into, it's a lot like Chapo. I know you've had the Chapo guys on. If people were familiar with them, we strike, I hope, a similar tone. We try to have the lowbrow and the highbrow. We try to have the absurd and funny mixed with the tragic and horrifying. And so in the show, we think of it as like a Coen Brothers or Safdie brothers retelling of the Iraq War, where we want to talk about all the corruption and all of the real skeezy. I mean, Ahmed Chalabi, a lot of the Bush people. These are characters straight out of one of those movies, and disappearing money.
Curveball? Do you get
Curveball? Yeah. And Chalabi's guys in particular, he was, for people who don't know yet, until you listen to Blowback, now available on Stitcher Premium, he was a classic flim-flammer who was a big part of fabricating intelligence to get us in. He had personally declared himself Saddam's nemesis for a long time. Once he's in there, he becomes fat on all these kickbacks, and he basically becomes a Scorsese character. He transformed into a heavy, and his thugs would steal armored cars that were carrying money from one bank to another within Iraq, never seen again. There's a great book I just want to plug by R.M. Roston. He's a Reuters reporter now. He wrote a great book called The Man Who Pushed America to War, and it's about Chalabi. And that Chalabi story alone is an amazing and endless story of how you can not only change world history but get rich quick and make friends in the process. So yeah, we want to dig into all that stuff, but as to where the money really went, I still think no one really knows.
Well, it sounds fascinating, and I can't wait to listen, except for that part with the guy from Archer. I just don't I don't get that show.
No, me neither. It was we were throwing him a bone,
Well, it was nice of you. It was nice of you to do that.
Thanks.
Brendan James, the show is Blowback. You can find it on Stitcher Premium. And if you use the code Blowback, is that it? You get a month free?
Yep.
All right. Well, folks can check that out. Brendan, thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Sam. Stay healthy and stay safe.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
There we go. We're going to do a Freebie Friday just because I don't want to have to deal with the technical stuff involved here. Let's see if we can do some video today. My guess is going to be no. And if that's the case, then we'll just go to some sound. To some... I think we're going to be able to do video, but I'm suspecting that we're not going to be able to hear it. That's my guess for what technically is going to go wrong. But if not, I'm almost convinced that we'll be able to take calls. And maybe I'll pop that baby up right now. There are people on the line, I believe, but one never knows. Yes, they've probably been on the line for the whole show, and yeah, okay, good. We will get there in just a moment. Maybe I will call in on that as we try and do this. Check that out. Adomian's very funny. John Benjamin, hit or miss, but can be funny at times. I guess if you like that kind of thing.
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Please use no speakerphone and have your one comment or question ready. Listen for Sam to call out your area code. Sam will be with you shortly.
That, of course, works. Well, I'm going to upgrade this. I don't know if I have to drive back to the city and get some equipment, or if I got to hopefully get some shipments of new equipment in, but we'll see. But in the meantime, let's check this out. This is there we go. This is a video that was compiled by The Recount, and it is basically gives you a timeline of where Donald Trump is at in terms of his, I guess, accepting the reality of COVID-19. And, I think what is quite clear is that this is all very reflective of what Donald Trump was doing with the U.S. government. Apparently, they've iced CDC for whatever reason, because he's mad because there was leaks coming out of there, and they were telling the American public actually the truth about some of this stuff. And at one point, I think when Donald Trump is saying, this thing goes away, I think that's when Richard Burr from the Senate Intelligence Committee was meeting with some North Carolina donors and telling them this is going to be as bad as the 1918 pandemic, and you may want to sell some stocks. Here is this timeline of Donald Trump.
We have it totally under control. It's one person coming in from China.
We think we have it very well under control. We pretty much shut it down coming in from China.
You know, in April, supposedly it dies with the hotter weather. When it gets warm, historically, that has been able to kill the virus.
People are getting better. They're all getting better.
And the 15 within a couple of days is going to be down to close to zero.
It's going to disappear. One day, it's like a miracle. It will disappear.
And you'll be fine.
They're going to have vaccines, I think, relatively soon. Not only the vaccines, but the therapies. Therapies is sort of another word for cure. We're talking about very small numbers in the United States.
Our numbers are lower than just about anybody. It's really working out, and a lot of good things are going to happen.
And we are responding with great speed and professionalism.
It's going to go away.
Yeah, no, I don't take responsibility at all.
We're going to all be great. We're going to be so good. This came up, we came up so suddenly.
This is a pandemic. I felt it was a pandemic long before it was called a pandemic. All you had to do is look at other countries. The coronavirus, you know that, right? Coronavirus. And this is their new hoax. We're 15 people in this massive country. And because of the fact that we went early, we could have had a lot more than that. We're doing great. Our country is doing so great.
Yeah, there it is. I mean, that's what we're looking at. This is, I mean, I know a lot of you folks know this, but the American public needs to know it. And frankly, I don't think this is going to fully cut it. But maybe this inspires, I don't know, Joe Biden, the presumptive, nominee. Maybe it's a little early to call him that, but certainly they're acting like they are. Well, then they should act like they are. And they should get out there and they should be pushing Donald Trump, if not for the sake of the election in November, but for the sake of, the country. He's still putting out lies every day. So here is Richard Burr. He is trying to, in some way, justify the fact there was a piece by NPR, and I can't quite get this to move, I guess. There was a piece by NPR. We read it. I think we started off the show with it yesterday. And Burr responded to it by, of course, blaming the NPR. They wrote, in a tabloid-style hit piece today, NPR knowingly and irresponsibly represented a speech I gave last month about the coronavirus threat. And he said, let me set the record straight, he says here, trying to get this out so you can see him getting quite ratioed. This lunch was hosted on February 27th by the North Carolina State Society. It was publicly advertised and widely attended by donors. NPR knew but did not report that the attendees also included many non-members, bipartisan congressional staff, and representatives from the governor's office. Look, the idea that you're saying this in a non-televised way in a luncheon does not make it any better. You were not saying this to the American public. And it turns out, he goes on to say, every state has a state society. They aren't secretive or high dollar. He's changing the real issue here. They're great civic institutions that bring people in D.C. together for events, receptions, and lunches. And they're open to anyone who wants to get involved. Right, because people will take time off of their work to go and do it. Or is it just people who either are super rich and it's part of their job to go in and get information from the representatives they have paid for, or they get paid to go and get information and give information, like because they're lobbyists. Like most members of our Congress, I address our state society every year. That's a good thing. That's what we should be doing, meeting constituents and talking to them about the work. I wonder how many constituents were there that were not donors. How many constituents were there that were not donors? Where was this advertised? Give me a break. It's all about NPR's journalistic malpractice. Meanwhile, this was, of course, before people realized that Richard Burr was also divesting himself of stock based upon these briefings he was getting as the chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Well, just a reminder, it was Richard Burr. It was Lafleur from Georgia. She's the appointed Georgian senator. And we should say her husband is like the CEO of the corporation that owns the New York Stock Exchange. Interesting. That would be an interesting string to tug on. We also have James Inhofe selling stocks around that time. We also have Ron Johnson. I don't know if we've heard from anywhere else. Burr's office also rebutted a ProPublica story indicating he sold between $500 and $1.6 million in stock in the weeks leading up to the market collapse. An aide said the sale happened before market volatility began. What? Is that supposed to be a defense? Is that supposed to be a defense? That's the whole point. That's not a defense. That's almost an admission of guilt. If he had sold during the market volatility, it would be like, wait a second, the market's not responding well to this. I'm going to sell. Give me a break. Man, these people should be kicked out. There should be hearings. And like I say, don't hold hearings. Just start lobbing accusations and make them come back with justification. The Democrats are getting outplayed here again and again and again. And I would argue, like, I don't know. I'd be curious to see how many, how the mainstream media is covering this, how many seconds it lasts as a story, and frankly, independent media. Half the people on the left are, going to spend more time talking about the Democrats. And certainly if Dianne Feinstein or anybody else is involved in this, they should be booted too. But this is a Republican administration that is supposed to be handling this. And, it appears that the revolution is not going to happen. So it's rather important to take out Donald Trump. I hope people understand that at this point. God, there we go. Here is Tucker Carlson, who is out there really going after Richard Burr. Now, I should remind you that one of the reasons why they go after Richard Burr is because they've always hated this guy because he was heavily involved in, as far as they're concerned, he was a turncoat. This is someone post a Gateway Pundit headline. He was Richard Burr was a turncoat in impeachment at one point. But nevertheless, what Tucker Carlson is saying is correct. But, I mean, if Tucker Carlson's really interested, he should start digging around and see why we rejected a test weeks ago, months ago at this point, from the Germans.
So you may have seen the news reports this afternoon. The chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee sold more than $1 million in stock in mid-February after learning how devastating the Chinese coronavirus could be. He had inside information about what could happen to our country, which is now happening, but he didn't warn the public. He didn't give a primetime address. He didn't go on television to sound the alarm. He didn't even disavow an op-ed he'd written just 10 days before claiming America was, quote, better prepared than ever for coronavirus. He didn't do any of those things. Instead, what did he do? He dumped his shares in hotel stocks so he wouldn't lose money, and then he stayed silent. Now, maybe there's an honest explanation for what he did. If there is, he should share it with the rest of us immediately. Otherwise, he must resign from the Senate and face prosecution for insider trading. There is no greater moral crime than betraying your country in a time of crisis. And that appears to be what happened. We'll have more on the story tomorrow.
I mean, he's right. And I think there's more. I think we got to do that now. Of course, I think Tucker's also excited to get Collins in Georgia, maybe. But we should be doing that also with Ron Johnson. We should be doing that with Inhofe. And we should be doing with any other senator. I don't care what party they're from. They should all go. They should all go. Next up. So here is Kelly Lafleur. She is the Republican Georgian senator who was appointed. And she, too, is responding to the fact that she sold a bunch of stock after these briefings. And this is the way that she is addressing this. When was this from? This was, this is from March 10th. So she knows that we're talking about a Spanish flu level pandemic. And on March 10th, 10, 12, 13 days at least after that, after she sold her stocks, this is what she was telling the American public.
I wanted to give you an update on the coronavirus situation following a meeting today that we had in the Senate with the President, the Vice President, and Secretary Mnuchin. They shared with us some ways that they are approaching this situation as it unfolds. First of all, I want to commend this administration, the President, the Vice President, for leading such a strong response. Everything from travel bans, travel advisories, to screening that's underway that has really slowed this spreading to America. We talked in the meeting today about some additional responses that the administration is looking to take to make sure that consumers are protected, that we have all the medical testing that we need, and that the economy stays strong. The good news is the consumer is strong, the economy is strong, jobs are growing. Our president has done a fantastic job making sure that we're in the best position to manage through this situation. It's really important that we all take responsibility for washing our hands. I know I'm a frequent hand washer. I wash my hands even more now. I even wipe down my cell phone. Just taking common sense protections. Thanks so much. And
that was only 10 days ago. And she knew better 10 days before that. I mean, that's stunning. What did they think was going to happen? What did they think was going to happen? And if they didn't think bad things were going to happen, why did they sell their stocks? It's nuts. Really nuts. Now we have the states. They are hurting for all sorts of beds, respirators, medical capacity, masks, gloves. Here is Donald Trump saying, like, what do you want me to do about it?
You enabled, I guess is probably the best way to put it, the Defense Production Act yesterday, but you haven't pulled the trigger on it.
No, because we hope we're not going to need that.
You're getting a lot of calls on Capitol Hill from the Democratic leadership to pull the trigger on it. Why? What's the rationale for not doing it?
First of all, governors are supposed to be doing a lot of this work, and they are doing a lot of this work. The federal government's not supposed to be out there buying vast amounts of items and then shipping. You know, we're not a shipping clerk. The governors are supposed to be, as with testing, the governors are supposed to be doing it. We'll help out, and we'll help out wherever we can, and we can.
You want the 50 state governors to spend their time looking for the same test that every American needs and wants. Just for a moment, just contemplate this, right? I mean, they want us to believe that this guy is a businessman. You want 50 state governments pursuing the same exact thing, competing against each other, I guess, for limited resources, spending their time dealing with that as opposed to other things when the federal government could be doing. It's just a bizarre, and I believe this is actually part of their ideology. I don't think this is just Donald Trump lying and covering his ass. I think most of the people in there are these right-wing lunatics, and this is what they believe. We can't have the federal government do this. It's going to set a bad precedent.
Are supposed to be, as with testing, the governors are supposed to be doing it. We'll help out, and we'll help out wherever we can, and we can buy in volume, and in some cases, great volume. With the masks, as an example, which were really a problem. We have helped out, and there are right now millions of masks being made. But this...
Bloomberg News reported that those millions of masks being made won't be ready for 18 months.
As an example, which were really a problem. We have helped out, and there are right now millions of masks being made. But this is really for the local governments, governors, and people within the state, depending on the way they divide it up.
There it is, Donald Trump. Wasn't there there was a press conference the other day where somebody said, "Look, where does the buck stop?" And he goes, "Well, normally it stops with me." This is not a normal situation, so the buck does not stop with me. 2016, he says, "Only I can fix this." 2020, it's really actually, I specifically cannot fix this. I'm actually not even supposed to. Not my job. Normally the buck stops with me, but not in this case. Not in this case. Here is more from this press conference where Donald Trump basically goes on and say the White House was perfectly prepared for COVID-19. They just weren't prepared for any type of scrutiny on their preparation of COVID-19. That was the real problem.
Did have a sense that this was a pandemic that was coming. So why was the United States not prepared with more testing?
We were very prepared. The only thing we weren't prepared for was the media. The media has not treated it fairly. I'll tell you how prepared I was. I called for a ban from people coming in from China long before anybody thought it was. In fact, it was your network. I believe they called me a racist because I did that. It was many of the people in the room, they call me racist and other words because I did that, because I went so early. So when you say we weren't prepared, had I let these tens of thousands of people come in from China a day?
2 days ago, though, you did have a sense that this was a...
Yeah, it's the media's fault. The buck stops with me normally. But Brendan's sending me a tweet that where Trump said, oh, this is a recording of Burr. That's a little bit later. I'm sorry, I didn't see that. There's Donald Trump blaming the media, and apparently it's working. Apparently it's working, and that's because there is no pushback from the Democrats on this specific point. There's one Democrat right now who is in the best position to do that, and he's also running for president. That is not a coincidence. And yet, I mean, where are all the endorsers? Maybe they should come out and speak on behalf of Joe Biden, because they, by endorsing Joe Biden, not only have essentially created his success in this race, but they have put their reputations on the line. They should step up and maybe just say, we're speaking on behalf of Joe Biden. I mean, this is really, this is a real horror show, frankly. This one we already did. Oh, and this, look, folks, he's in control. Donald Trump is in control. Here he is, a video of the commander-in-chief listening to, actually a two-part video. First one is he's listening to Dr. Deborah Birx. Oh, no, it's Mike Pence first, and then it's Dr. Deborah Birx speaking second. This is during the White House COVID-19 task force meeting. And apparently it's a little bit boring for Donald Trump.
Free up more space in hospitals, including respirators. As Dr. Burks explained to me, that many people that require a respirator is because of a surgery gone wrong. And so this frees up more of our capacity across the board. I know it's not lost on any of the governors here, Mr. President, that by standing up FEMA, you now have essentially created a structure that every governor is very familiar with in dealing with disasters and emergencies. Free up more space in hospitals.
Unbelievable. Let's see. He's still
several days ago
snoozing
for
here.
the 2 weeks of stopping this virus. So we will stay in frontline workers who have been informing us about their changes. It's important that we're tracking the data on a county by county as granularly as we can, because we can look at whether mitigation is working in those. We'll get feedback from your community. This will only be solved if every single person in every single community takes responsibility to ensure they're following the presidential guidelines that were put out several days ago for the 2 weeks of stopping this virus. So we will stay in frontline
Pretend like
workers
I'm
who have
looking
been
at a
informed.
piece of paper. Look at this. This is unbelievable. This is unbelievable. This is what it's going to be like, folks, when he announces that he's just the dictator. We're just going to see videos of him sleeping on television, and we're going to sit here and we're going to make fun of it, and then when we go out in public, we're going to all be like, well, President Trump is doing a great job.
Free up more space in hospitals, including respirators. As Dr. Burks explained to me, that many people that require a respirator is because of a surgery gone wrong. And so this frees up more of our capacity across the board. I know it's not lost on any of the governors here, Mr. President, that by state.
Unbelievable. There it is, President of the United States. Don't worry, folks. He's got it covered. He's got you covered. Don't worry about a thing. We're going to be fine. Let's go to the phones. Who do we got here? Been hanging on for a long time. Calling from a 347 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, is this me?
Yeah, is this you? 347?
Yeah. Yes. Hi, I'm James from New York.
James from New York. What's on your mind?
Hi. I just want to talk about the Democratic primary election. I know it's for Bernie Sports really been a real gut punch. Like we saw Bernie, he was really gaining momentum from Iowa to New Hampshire to Nevada, and then Biden swooped in South Carolina and just really blunted that momentum. And there's a very likely chance he'll be the Democratic nominee.
Right.
But I think a lot of people. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people, we obviously feel really passionate about Bernie, especially people my age, because he was the first politician to really get us interested in politics. He was someone who really inspired us. But at the same time, I think sometimes we miss the forest from the trees with that, because it really is about building the movement. It's not about that one person. Like we saw Marie Newman in Illinois take out Dan Lipinski. That's a huge win. He was one of the worst members in the House. He's finally gone. Jessica Cisneros, she came up short against Henry Cuellar. She only lost by 4 points. She could definitely beat him next time. I think we really have to focus on that movement building and not lose sight of the bigger picture. Like in New York, I'm helping out Semelis Lopez in New York's 15th congressional district, so she can replace Jose Serrano, who's retiring this year. And I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that she becomes the progressive leader that the South Bronx deserves.
Great. Well, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, I think it is unfortunate that we have the nominee that it appears that we're going to have. But, like you say, Lipinski out is good. And, we keep working on a local level. That's super important. Appreciate the call.
Exactly. And also, I just want to say thank you for so much for the work you do. This definitely cannot be easy for you.
I think there's It's frustrating, but I got to be honest with you. I think a lot of people have it worse. At least, I still have a job, and I'm getting income, and so, but I appreciate it. But yeah, I think there's enough difficulty going around, but I appreciate it. Thanks, James. Thanks for calling.
No problem.
Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 610 area code. Who's this?
This is Nick from Pennsylvania.
Nick from Pennsylvania. What's on your mind, Nick?
Well, first I wanted to say thank you, Sam, as the other caller did, for continuing on. I called in a while ago, probably a month or two ago now, and shouted out my podcast, so I just want to shout it out again. It's non-applicable because I'm a college student and no one really cares about our thoughts, but figured to give it out. I mean, I agree a lot of college students are being stupid right now and enjoying spring break in the most idiotic ways, but my sort of question for you, Sam, is where do you think the movement with Sanders is going forward, after this?
I mean, I long range, and let me let you go because you got that thing going on in the background, but I'll answer it after. I appreciate the call.
One other thing. Wait, Sam.
Yeah.
Can you just give a shofar because it's my birthday?
Buddy, I'm not in studio. I don't have the thing, but I'll tell you what I'll tell you.
Oh, that's right.
I tell you what I can do. I can do one of these.
All right.
Happy
Thanks
birthday.
enough, Sam. You can let me go. Go ahead.
All right. Happy
Thank
birthday. It's sort of an away game shofar. I'm going to get that set up. That is my attempt over the weekend. Look, I think in terms of moving our politics leftward, put aside what we're going through now, because I don't really have a sense of where we're going to be on the end of this. I mean, long term, I think, things are positive. You look at those numbers and you can't help but see just an enormous disparity between people under the age of 45 and people above the age of 45 in terms of what they support. And and keep in mind, those people over the age of 45, they are a significant portion of them are simply voting on their perception that Biden can win, as opposed to Sanders. They are not voting upon an ideology. And the way this is being spun is that this is like the center holding and stopping, the radicalism. And I think that's a misreading of what's happening. I think it's more like this is a flight to safety, as it were, where, and safety being defined in their mind by somebody who is sure to win, somebody who is a safe bet, and part of the evidence that he is a safe bet is just simply that all the other candidates came around and endorsed him. And so that's, I think, what we're seeing is that from an ideological and a movement standpoint, we know where at least the Democratic Party is, broadly speaking. It is not necessarily for Bernie Sanders in this circumstance, but it is for Medicare for all. It is for the policies that Bernie Sanders have. And I want to make it clear, I wanted Sanders to win. And frankly, I would have liked someone more progressive than Biden to win, even if it meant that the policies weren't as Sanderized as Sanders. But it is what it is. And I think the support for those policies, will it push Biden left? Of course it will. For any politician who wants to sort of have any future success, they can see that they're going to, at the very least, they're going to have to give on some of the stuff that they wouldn't have had to give on 5 or 10 years ago. Will it be sufficient? My guess is no. Calling from an 805 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, I'm James from California, which is kind of a coincidence because you just had James from New York.
Well, we try and cover all the Jameses.
Yeah, you got a real duality of James thing going on. I'm kind of the West Coast James. So, West Coast James here. I just want to kind of talk about what you were actually just talking about with the whole generation gap. We got a real generation gap in American politics right now. And, it's kind of at a stalemate because people in my generation, younger generation, don't vote. People in the older generation don't really have any political message reach them because, just kind of jacked into the traditional media, and they do vote in large numbers. And that's kind of a hard thing to overcome. So I had and this also falls in line with your kind of a blame the electorate worldview. So I had a couple of potential policy prescriptions for this that I just kind of wanted to run past you, if that's okay.
Sure.
All right. First one is that no serving politician can be over 50 years of age. What do you think about that?
I think that's probably a little narrow, but
all right.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think maybe you could do 65 or 70.
How old are you, by the way?
I'm older than 50.
All right. Well, I was going to try to rope you in. I was going to try to expand it a little bit to sweeten the pot, but
55 would do. But I mean, honestly,
fine.
like, look, I think people. I mean, obviously, you can't put that age requirement, I think, on it, but you would want it maybe at the age of retirement. Does he want to do it? All right, we'll get him in a minute. Go ahead. What's the next one?
All right. Second one. President limited to one term.
What's that supposed to achieve?
Well, because in the second term, a lot of the for one, the incumbency advantage is huge, right? In the second term that a president runs, and I feel like that's really particularly prevalent with kind of low information voters, which do tend to skew kind of older, right? People who aren't so much voting based on their ideology as they are kind of just a vague social inclination.
Well, but that's not necessarily
that was one of my
that's
more
not
moderate
necessarily low information voters, is it? It's not.
Well, I mean, it probably not exclusively, but I would say
well,
that.
How are you defining low information voters?
Basically, just people who aren't voting based on like a set of beliefs, just kind of voting based on vague.
Well,
I
think
just
I
kind
think
of
what
vague
you
social inclinations.
Yeah, I think what you want to say there is non-ideological. I mean, they may have more information
sure,
than your
yeah.
average voter, but
Yeah.
they just may also be like,
Well,
they may be choosing other cues.
Yeah. Well, the other motivation for not having a second term is just that a lot of the second term of a sitting president, a lot of the first term of the sitting president just kind of comes prepping for the second term, right? I mean, so much of our public institutions were just completely decimated by Nixon trying to, curb the food shortage and get reelection and stuff like that. I feel like that's the main concern.
That reelection, would you do like a 6-year term then?
Oh, it can still be 4 years.
All right. That's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
What
all
else
right, well,
you
this
got?
next idea is the most interesting. All right.
If you do
your
say
vote
so
is
yourself.
proportional to how much longer. Sorry, what?
If you do say so yourself.
Oh, I do say so myself,
All
Sam.
right.
Believe me.
Okay.
The last idea is your vote is proportional to how much longer you're going to live. So we have like a physician in every voting station giving like a test. You got to run on the treadmill with all the little things hooked up to you. And if you're going to live for like 2 more years, then you don't really get to vote on like, a 4-year plan, right? It's not really fair. So voting proportional to how much longer you're going to live. What do you think?
California is it's recreational marijuana there, right? I mean, look, I would say this, James. I would say this. It would be an interesting. I think the value of these things are to make people think a little bit, and I would not obviously. You get a physical and an actuarial table. Although it might be interesting. It might be interesting to say like, okay, your vote, if you are under the age of 25, is worth 2 units, let's say, and
yeah, well,
through
that was
the
what I was
age of
actually going to suggest. I was
25
joking,
to
yeah.
65, it actually diminishes. I mean, that's not.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's some practical problems with it, but that's not a bad idea to like convince younger people to come out and vote. Although The other idea is that maybe you have a little bit more experience, and in some situations you're better suited to voting at that age. But appreciate the call, James. Matt says that you need to pace yourself on dipping into your stash better. My understanding is that they're keeping the dispensaries open in California as essential businesses. I'm not joking about that. Brendan says they're essential even. So, all right, hold on for 1 second. Now, we have a special guest. I got a challenge last night from listener Ronald Reagan. He wanted to challenge my son Saul to a debate about Frozen 2. Now, hold on for 1 second. Mila is here. Mila, would don't touch the camera, but if you can reach that microphone over there, can you see it? Do you see it back there? Can you reach it without touching the camera? Just be careful. I know. Yeah. Careful. Okay. Now, hand me that cable that's there, that XLR cable. Yeah, that one right there. Yeah. Yeah, there you go. All right. Yeah, don't worry about that. All right. Thank you. And there's a little Friday treat. We have a. Where? No, nothing you can eat. Hold on 1 sec.
No, I said you said Friday treat.
I did say Friday treat.
I have some news. No, you said treat. Hey, Dad.
What's that? I don't understand what you're saying.
First corona case in where we are.
Oh, really? Oh, this is the wrong cable. Shoot. All right, hold on. Saul, come over here. The guy who you were supposed to have the debate with has not called in. So here, come right here. I know you don't want to look on camera. Do you? All right. Well, there you go. All right, you can hide right here. Now, come here. Don't come back around here, buddy. Dude, come. What are you doing? This is not. You got to debate somebody. I want you to just say to Ronald Reagan, come at me, coward, or something like that, because he wants to debate you about Frozen 2. No, here, come on, dude. Stop hiding behind me. All right. Well, if you're not going to come on, then I got to get on with the show. We can't do this stuff. All right. Well. All right. Well, listen. All right, guys. You can come back on in a bit. I got more stuff to do. If you're not going to debate, you gotta go ahead. Just say Ronald Reagan. Come at me, man. Something like that.
I'll say it with you.
Go ahead.
1, 2, 3.
Okay. All right. Well, a little shy. Well, it's a little, I thought I raised you to be a little bit. What are you What are you doing? All right. Step out. Let's go. All right, guys.
Hey, Saul, come on.
All right. Well, if you change your mind and this guy calls in, then we'll do it. Okay. All right. Well, yeah, you can debate him on Frozen 2, but Saul really thought it was better than 1. All right, guys, go back to schoolwork. Clean up the kitchen. Do something.
Oh, by the way.
Well, now's not the time to tell me. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. All right. Sorry about that, folks. There's nothing like getting challenged on a debate and then not showing up. I think that's pretty bad. Here is Joe Biden has, look at that. Good for him. He has hopped on Twitter after we have spent the whole time basically saying that Joe Biden needs to step up, come across as presidential, and remind the American public, who is at fault here, and then come out and offer real suggestions as to what we should be doing to put pressure on Donald Trump. And he says, I am calling on every CEO in America. Let me see if I can get this up here. Hold on for 1 second. Maybe I can get it up on screen here and we can read it. Probably not. The first thing that comes up when I search Joe Biden was Charlie Kirk. Great. Let's see. All right, here it is. We can move this over here. All right, so Joe Biden has tweeted out. Let's see what he has here to say. I am calling on every CEO in America to publicly commit now to not buying back their company stock over the course of the next year. As workers face the physical and economic consequences of the coronavirus, our corporate leaders cannot cede responsibility for their employees. This is meaningless. This is meaningless. If we're going to bail these people out, these corporations, which is a bailout of the CEOs, we need to tie it to no bonuses, no corporate buybacks. And not just for now. He should say, when I become president, if I become president, when I become president, we will have no more corporate buyouts, because it creates perverse incentives for the C-suite and perverse incentives for the CEOs. And if they can afford to pay themselves bonuses and buy out their stock instead of putting it into reserves to take care of, to deal with, possible fluctuations in the market, well, then they're not available. Bailouts are not available. Every CEO in America should be focusing on workers, families, and communities, not executive compensation and share prices. Well, that's great. That's a great thing to say if you have a YouTube show or you have a Twitter feed and you have no possible ability to implement any policies. It's great to have an opinion about what CEOs do. But if you are in a position or anticipate being in a position or hope to be in a position of authority, like, let's say, the President of the United States, how about instead of counting on CEOs to do the right thing, if it's the right thing, how about using your ability in government to do that? It's certainly not unprecedented. Up until 1985, the SEC considered buying back your stocks to be illegal. Up until the 80s, capital gains was treated in the same way that regular income was, and so it didn't incentivize buying back stocks so that your compensation as a CEO or board of directors or C-suite goes up with it. These are all things that government can do. We don't have to ask or even insist that CEOs do the right thing. We saw how that worked out during the Obama administration, when the Obama administration said to banks, here's your money for your bailout. Now do the right thing with it. And they said, okay. And then later we all found out that they had a slightly different notion of what do the right thing meant. Do the right thing meant in their terms, like, let's use this money to make more money. And if it comes at the expense of people who are foreclosed, they're SOL. God, what a clown. I'll still vote for him over Donald Trump. I'll still vote for him over Donald Trump. But I don't know what other people are going to do. I still think other people should vote for him over Donald Trump, but I'm quite convinced that if there are people who feel dispossessed, they're not listening to my show. I can tell you that right now. I think the people who are not going to listen are sort of out there. But he can do better than this. He should do better than this. Have the endorsees get up there. Damn. Calling from a 631 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam, it's Phil McCrory again.
Phil. Phil McCrory.
How are you, Phil? I'm back. I wanted to give you an update. I got some information from the Board of Elections. It turns out that they've, Governor Cuomo ended signature elections by executive order on Wednesday or Tuesday. It's difficult to tell what day it is anymore. But they did not change any of the requirements for independent candidates. So right now, and that period is still the same between April 14th and like May 15th or something like that. And yeah, we're not going to be able to do that. And there's been no word yet. I know they're very busy and they have a lot of stuff going on, but they had the executive order to fix the party primary signature requirements, but nothing yet on independents. So still trying to figure out if independents are even going to be able to run in these elections statewide in New York.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I imagine there's a lot on their plate at this point. I don't know what they're thinking about in terms of doing elections. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean,
so, and real quick,
go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. I just want to again, kind of plug the site because, I still want to try to gather momentum if they do end up changing these rules. Running here as a kind of I guess call myself like a populist. That's the best way to put it because I'm trying to true independent.
Yeah, just remind people you're running in Long Island, right? And Peter King's old district. I'm sorry, we just lost one of the mic channels, and so it's I'm getting notices that we lost half our audio, and frankly I didn't touch anything, and I don't know why. So I don't mean to rush you, but I think I'm going to have to wrap this up because we're losing audio.
Okay, can I give you a website real quick?
Yeah, do.
Yeah, so it's philmac4congress.com. That's PHILMAC for Congress.com, and what I'm promoting is direct democracy, going pretty aggressively at corporations, especially here on Long Island, and trying to be agnostic about those issues that divide Long Islanders, especially a lot of Catholics on the South Shore here. So check me out, and it's kind of unorthodox. It's philmac4congress.com, PHILMAC for Congress.com. Thanks a lot, Sam.
Appreciate the call. All right, folks, I'm going to have to wrap up. I mean, for whatever reason, one of the channels of audio just gave out. This is the type of stuff I've been dealing with. I can't, I didn't do anything. I didn't touch anything. And it feels like the sound is degrading as we go. I have no idea. I've just got to get different equipment in here. This equipment was just on its last legs. I'm sorry. I can't take any more phone calls. This is just the situation that we have. I apologize. But we'll be a little bit better. We made it through the whole show today. Folks, hang in there. We will be back on Monday. And until then, stay safe. And don't forget, check out the AM Quickie. We're doing that every morning. And we'll see you then. Let's see if I can do this.
It might take all the strength I got.